Today's story is another story by Neita Oviatt Friend. Before I read this story, there are two things. I would like to remind everyone that it was written long ago and that children can play with whatever toys they want to play with. So that means that girls can play with trains and boys can play with dolls. Also, when I'm reading this story, I will use the word brownies, and it's not something that you eat. It's another word for elves. They're the legendary good-natured elves that perform helpful services at night. Christmas soap bubbles. Once upon a time, a long time ago, Santa Claus was sitting at his desk in his private office thinking. He was thinking very hard about the Brownies who were working in the toy shop. They were making toys for Christmas. The Brownies had worked there for years and years and had never been away from the North Pole. Santa Claus was thinking it was about time the Brownies had a vacation. There was Mike, the mechanic, who made the mechanical toys, Caleb, the carpenter, who made the wooden toys, Bobby, the bookmaker, who made the books, and Percy, the painter, who did the painting. There was Timmy, the train man, who tested the electric trains, Peter, the pilot, who flies the airplanes, Stephen, the stuffer, who stuffed the stuffed animals, and Danny, the doll maker. So Santa went out into the toy shop where the Brownies were busy sawing, hammering, painting, stuffing, and told them he was going to take them on the Christmas journey with him. "You mean when you take the toys to the children on Christmas Eve?" asked Stephen the stuffer. "Yes, that's what I mean," Santa Claus replied. "And what's more, I am going to let you go down the chimney with me." After that, the Brownies worked harder than ever, and every day they practiced going up and down the chimney in Santa Claus's office so they wouldn't get stuck. When Mrs. Santa Claus heard the Brownies were going on the Christmas journey, she said, "My goodness, they can't go traveling in those old clothes. I'll have to make new ones for them." So she made each Brownie a new red suit with pointed shoes and a pointed cap, and trimmed the suits with white fur. At last everything was ready for the trip. The toys were packed in the sleigh. The reindeer were hitched up and tinkling bells were fastened to the harness. Santa climbed into the sleigh and blew his whistle for the Brownies. There wasn't much room for the Brownies, but Mrs. Santa Claus helped to tuck them in, and they did not mind being squeezed. As soon as everyone was settled, Santa Claus cracked his long whip, shouted, "Giddy up!" and off they galloped into the sky. It was a clear, cold night, with a bright moon shining. Every time they went through a cloud, Santa turned around in his seat to see if any of the Brownies had fallen out. But they were hanging on tight. So he cracked his whip again and urged the reindeer to go faster. At first there was only snow and ice, but after a while the Brownies could see lights twinkling far below in the distance. "Oh, look!" cried Percy the painter. "Some of the stars have fallen out of the sky." "Not at all," said Santa Claus. "Those are street lights in a village." "Like those we made for the electric trains?" asked Timmy, the train man. "Well, it's the same idea," Santa Claus replied. "But now you must be quiet. We are going to stop at that first white house." Without a sound, Santa brought the sleigh to a stop on the roof. He turned to Caleb and whispered, "Come on, Caleb. You are a good climber. You may go with me this time." Santa Claus disappeared down the chimney. Then Caleb crawled out from under the seat, scrambled over the other Brownies, and ran to the chimney. Just as he put his leg over the chimney to slide down, up popped Santa Claus like a jack-in-the-box. "You'll have to move faster than that if you want to go with me," Santa Claus chuckled as he jumped into the sleigh and called, "Giddy up!" If I hadn't been for Danny the doll-maker, who grabbed Caleb by the leg and pulled him into the sleigh, poor Caleb would have been left standing there on the roof. "That was too bad, Caleb," Santa Claus said. "But you see, I have to visit all the children in the world tonight, and I haven't time to wait for slowpokes." The next stop was at a red brick house on the corner where there were 6 little girls. Santa Claus told Danny the doll maker that he would go down the chimney this time, if he would hurry. Danny took an armful of dolls and followed so closely that he nearly got his foot tangled in Santa Claus's long white whiskers as they slid down the chimney. As soon as Santa Claus and Danny got back into the sleigh, off they went again. They traveled on and on through the night. Each brownie took his turn going down the chimney, because each one had his special work to do. Mike the mechanic took the mechanical toys. Timmy the train man took the electric trains. Stephen the stuffer took the stuffed animals, and Bobby the bookmaker took the books. They were almost through and were finishing up at the last house in Germany when Santa Claus noticed a streak of light in the eastern sky. "Oh, look, Brownies, look over there," he said as he stood on the housetop. "The sun is coming up, and we haven't much time left." He took the last load and dashed down the chimney and came up again so quickly that the Brownies asked him if he had left all the presents there. "I guess so," he panted, jumping into the sleigh. "But I didn't take time to fill the stockings. I just dumped the things on the floor and ran because I heard little feet pattering on the stairs. That is the nearest I ever got to being caught." They drove along, watching the sun come up in the east. The sky became lighter, the stars disappeared, and the streetlights went out. The reindeer seemed to be very tired. So when they got to the edge of the Black Forest in Germany, Santa Claus said, "We are still a long way from home. I believe I will stop here for a while to let the reindeer rest." He circled around until he found a clearing in the middle of the forest, then glided down and slowly came to a stop in front of a big fir tree. "Now you Brownies can get out and look around," Santa Claus said, "but don't go far." As the Brownies jumped out of the sleigh, a package tied up in green paper fell out upon the snow. "Oh, Santa, look!" cried Peter the pilot. "There is a present that was meant for the little boy at the last house." "So it was," replied Santa Claus. "So it was. But he has plenty of toys anyway. Open it up and play with it yourselves. I'm going to take a nap." He settled himself comfortably on the seat and went to sleep. When the Brownies opened the package, they found 8 little pans, 8 pieces of soap, and 8 little pipes. "Hooray!" the Brownies shouted. "Soap bubble pipes for each of us!" Each one grabbed a set and ran over to a little creek at the edge of the clearing. They broke the ice with a stone and filled their pans with water. Then they began to blow soap bubbles. "Let's see who can blow the biggest one," suggested Stephen the stuffer, for he had had lots of experience blowing up rubber toys. He blew a beautiful big bubble, and the wind carried it up to the very top of the big fir tree branch, and looked like a bright crystal ball as it glistened in the sunshine. "Oh, let's all do that!" cried Bobby the bookmaker. The Brownies began to dance around the big fir tree, blowing soap bubbles up into the snow-covered branches. They danced, they laughed, and they blew more soap bubbles. Suddenly they stopped and listened. There was the sound of sweet music coming closer and closer. Then they saw the woodwind fairies dancing out of the forest, playing on their flutes. Santa Claus heard the music too. He opened his eyes and began to pinch himself. all over because he thought he must be dreaming. It was the loveliest sight he had ever seen, that one big fir tree standing alone in the snow, with soap bubbles dangling from its branches, and the brownies in their red suits dancing around it. Then he saw the adorable little woodwind fairies, dressed in white with their sky blue wings playing on their golden flutes. The brownies and the fairies sang and danced together around and around the tree. But as the sun rose higher in the sky, the fairies suddenly stopped dancing and scurried off into the forest. "Don't go!" called the brownies. "Please don't go." "We must," they answered, "or the sun's rays will melt our wings. Look at your bubbles." The brownies looked up at the tree, and sure enough, the bubbles were bursting like toy balloons. "Oh dear, oh dear," the brownies wailed. "Our lovely bubbles are melting." They all began to cry, and their voices echoed back and forth until it sounded as if 800 brownies were weeping and wailing. Then suddenly a voice called from the forest, "Hi there! What's the trouble?" The brownies stopped crying and looked toward the forest. Who should they see coming toward them but Jack Frost himself? He was dressed in a suit of blue ice, and he wore a perky red cap on his head. "What's the trouble?" he asked again. "Trouble enough," the brownies shouted, all talking at once. "We trimmed up the tree with beautiful soap bubbles, and the sun is melting them away." "Oh, I'll fix that in a jiffy," said Jack Frost cheerfully. He took a deep breath, then blew a great gust of cold wind. The soap bubbles froze into balls of clear ice. They hung on the tree, glistening like prisms, reflecting all the colors of the rainbow. The brownies clapped their hands and cheered for Jack Frost. Santa Claus shouted from his sleigh, "Nice work, Jack Frost! Nice work!" In the midst of the cheering, Jack Frost held up his hand, saying, "Brownies, I have an idea. I am going to paint those balls, just as I paint the leaves in the fall." He hurried off into the forest and soon came back with his pots of paint. He worked so fast that the brownies could hardly believe their eyes. He painted some of the balls red, some green, some yellow, and some he left silvery white. Then he disappeared into the forest as quickly as he had come. The brownies began to chatter, but Santa Claus held up his hand for silence. He sat very quietly, and the brownies knew that he was thinking. At last he spoke. "Brownies, I have an idea." "You have?" they asked, crowding around him. "Yes, I have. Next year, we are going to make colored glass balls to hang on the Christmas trees in Germany. Then, if the German children like them, I will take them to the rest of the world." And that is how we came to have colored glass balls on our Christmas trees at Christmas time. The beginning. Thanks for joining me. Have a great night.